Okay, so Cartel, welcome back. And we now welcome Green Incorporated Limited, Mr. McPhee, welcome. And you have with you John Craig, welcome. And you're here to talk to us about token. So we will hand it over to you. We've received your evidence and read it, at least one, but feel free to take us through a summary of that, if you wish.
Sure. I thought we might start with Dr. Craig's presentation, just to give some context.
Okay, that's good.
About the zone, and then I'll just a brief overview of my evidence.
Is this something up on the screen?
Yes, I am just sharing it now.
Oh, that's
So yeah, that works with.
And if you just aim it at the laptop where you would like to change, I'll just put it on to regular.
Can we go to the beginning?
Yes. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. So just a few slides to let you know what we're doing and how it fits with the project that's been going for 20 years. Okay, so you the proposed district plan have rules, and these include promotion of restoration and enhancement of the business biodiversity, and under the national policy statement on Indigenous biodiversity, there are also requirements on local government to encourage restoration, and this is recognition of the opportunity cost of doing this. But unfortunately, there's no substance or detail about how on earth that would happen. I can understand why there are difficulties there. And then there are, of course, you have regulations which try and stop people doing bad things to Indigenous biodiversity, which are all disincentives for those of us who cover the land in Indigenous biodiversity. We don't know totally what's going to happen. So TIPOs actually suggest not the expected situation you would have for most of your land holdings, which is why we need potentially a different option, and hence the request for a special plan. So if you look at the map, basically the majority of the purple red lines outline the property, and the majority of the property is really low class land situated, so it's very steep, erosion prone land, and not ideal farming land. But there is some land which is of one fair quality, which will always be kept in farming. So at the time of purchase, as I said, really poor quality land, most of it. There was no pest control. There was minimal flowering or seeds. We had hoped to grow our own plants, but basically all the flowers and fruit were eaten, so there was nothing for us to collect. There were 5 recommendations for SMAs on the property, and these related predominantly to features where totterel and oystercatcher were nesting. See in the top right, oystercatcher with 2 chicks on Kaikohe last breeding season. There was also an SNA for an area that had been fenced from stock. Sorry, this suggested SNA. But all the areas had every pest you could imagine. We watched pigs grazing on sheep on backs, so enormous pigs. But everything else was there, which was like, well, basically no birds. Were a few birds. I stayed there one Christmas and 20 trees and one building only. So yes, occasionally we got a bird in, but very few of them, and the word distance. So, and the site unexpectedly has extensive agricultural. So, what were the plans we have? The plan is to replant the majority of the low-grade soil, steep, roadable land for carbon for biodiversity. So the initial plan, we've set aside 700 hectares. We've taken it out of closure. There's a list there of all the bait stations and different forms of traps that you could imagine to catch and kill everything that we possibly can, clean this place up. We've already started planting 27,000 in the first year. We doubled it the next year. We doubled it again this year. We've got 3 more years of 100,000 plants going in. So it's underway, and if you go there at the moment, it looks like the land of people in pre-release phase. So in effect, we're making about 700 hectares into an area. So the problems, if we want to put in a road or a walking track or on a existing pasture, there are very few constraints. If we plant it in pines, there's another option. Again, very few constraints. We can chop them down when we want to, and we can put in line. But by making this into the equivalent of an SNA, then the proposed district plan really constrains us in the future. So my question is this what your policy of promoting and enabling restoration? Is that what we mean by that? Unfortunately, it's full of distancings for us, so a special zone we see as the only easy way around. So again, just the picture of it, basically everything right at that yellow line, which is the main road leading down to the houses, has been taken out of grazing, will be by the end of this winter. By Christmas. Tiny is the company. We have a property it's outside North, and basically it's built on a sustainable business model. It's getting money from nature, and this comes from honey. It's already a business. It's a skincare business. We already have people coming and staying in houses, and we have walking tracks for them. We hope in the future biodiversity and carbon credits, and we are continuing planting, although we've planted an enormous part of it. And then those dollars are used to restore biodiversity, so we plant, and because we do pest control, we planted 500,000 trees, and the natural regrowth that's come about by controlling the pests is about 8.5 million. So we live in nature doing the job over most of the year. So the basic thing is we're investing in biodiversity. We're then using natural products and people using biodiversity to get money, to invest more in. We're trying to create a completely circular business model. To give you an example of changes, this is the Valley I live in, which is adjacent to Tahi. This is in 2003, and the next picture shows you what it was like in 2020. So we put in water, we put in plants, control pests, and basically when we got there, we constantly had slips and we had floods. We had not had either of those in the last 3 years. And we measured everything. We've started at Tupou, we brought in independent people, ecological solutions, RMA ecology, and regional council all did measures in the very first year, so that we can show the changes, demonstrate what changes are going to happen. If you go to the Tahi website online, you can see what we've done, the bird species, and the density is increased, carbon sequestration is measured, and because of pest control and no-more grazes, that's increased significantly. We've introduced kiwi to the property, we're already at 200. We have to introduce them at Tahi, and the breeding rate there is 6 times anything that's been published anywhere else. So we've established a pool to help us and others called the BVI, Biodiversity Value Index, which measures the carbon value of the biodiversity value of plants. Tahi also has the second highest population of pataki, our rarest duck, and we were the 4th highest in bittern calling which is last spring season. So just to give you an example, the left-hand side, the blue is total bird species, the orange is rare and endangered species, the lower number of the left was when we got there, the other is where we're at now, so you can see a large number of endangered and threatened species are now common on Tahi, whereas we were before. If you look at the other side, it's carbon sequestration. The orange is Manuka carnica. The blue tooth shaker is what you get with harvesting. The green is what you get with Northland native trees. Northland's very lucky to have a lot of incredibly deep carbon against trees like Kaikohe, So we measure all this, and you can see that you're far better off if you want to store carbon by using indigenous forests than pine trees. So BVI is a tool that we've developed, and hopefully we can use it with council to make sure that we're looking after biodiversity. For example, if you want to clear an area of land, it's much more important that you leave the really dense carbon trees and the ones that are ideal for birds and insects, and get rid of the smaller short-lived shrubs or ones that don't have high carbon density. So we've used these. I'll show you in the next slide how it comes together for a BVI, and we plan to use this at Tupou if we wish to make changes to what's already in the plant. So this is just a set of plants you can see down the left-hand side, and then read it, and we go across to scientific name, then how long these trees will live, and then how dense is the wood, the green, and then we come out with a number which is basically the carbon value of that plant. Now we've done it for lots and lots of plants. This is just an example for you, and please look at the bottom, that's where pine trees are, and then the 2 columns have green at the top. This is the value of those plants to birds and then to invertebrates. Again, you come out with a number, and on the right hand side you get that to 100. And you can see the top two trees for us at Tahi are Pururi and Rutakawa. And West tree possibly put a more pine tree. So that's a tool that we have to show that we actually do not want to take out anything that is high in value in carbon. So one of the questions you probably have is, well, where will the ecotourism facilities go, education facilities go to? The problem is we don't really know. At Tahi, it's taken us 20 years to decide where we're putting a range of buildings, and it was only last year that we put in what we call the long walk, 6.5 hour walks around the property. So it's only once things grow up and water's in place that you realise one of the best places to take people to explain. We also want to put in tracks. Now, your rules say you can put in a fence and clear the 3.5 metres. We have a track to 1.2. We want a track that can take a four-wheel drive vehicle for safety reasons and for maintenance reasons. So we'd like tracks that are 3 metres wide. We'll use existing roads and tracks, and there are quite a lot of them as part of anything we do. Buildings will likely be something they've got a view of wetlands or a forest or a city, and be really adjacent to those things. And accommodation is likely to be in areas close to the beaches. Again, we actually don't know at this point, we're only just starting. For us, key priority is get the biodiversity in place. So what are we asking for? We're asking for a special zone.
Okay, thank you. I'll just see if the other commissioners have any questions.
No, that's fine. Thanks. It's informative. Yeah.
Obviously, it's impressive to see what you've done. Were you there at hearing 4 and eco stuff previously? Were you at hearing number 4 and made evidence to us at that hearing?
Oh, yeah, I was.
Yeah, the one we had at Open Own. Yeah, I recorded
yeah.
And
Yeah, you've got to see some of that before.
yes,
Some of them.
thank you. Well, over to you, Mr. McLean.
Thank you. I won't go into the outcome sort. I think that's been addressed by Dr. Craig in some detail, so I won't repeat. I will say that I had a chance to look at the introduction from the 42-hour report writer from yesterday and understand from that discussion that there is general support for the outcome of the zone. The main contention seems to lie with the method of delivery. Later. But while the current rural production zone land holdings do not work, I submit that the existing rural production zone is not suitable. The proactive and integrated restoration project that's being sought. The rural production zone is principally designed to support primary production rather than proactively enabling large-scale restoration. While I appreciate that the restoration can be done as of right, landowners are effectively discouraged because successfully restored land can become an SNA, as Craig highlighted, which carries restrictive controls that limit further land use. The rural production zone does not provide a clear pathway for ecotourism and eco-education facilities that are essential to fund the long-term conservation work that you need for this land holding. I do contend that the solution is a bespoke two-coat special purpose zone, as it is tailored planning framework designed to overcome the limitations of the standard zones in the PDP. It combines ecological restoration with economic activities like ecotourism and eco-education. The health of the ecosystem directly drives projects' financial viability, creating a self-sustained loop. And the development within the zone is guided by 2 key documents, being the Reforestation and Biodiversity Management Plan and the Pest Management Plan. The zone itself, it provides a clear enabling pathway that gives the landowner the confidence to invest in this long-term project. I'll just touch on the national planning standards in terms of its justification for a new special zone. And I've outlined this in my evidence, but just to reiterate, in terms of significance to the district, region, or country, I'm not aware of a test or case law that defines what is significant in this context. However, I consider the Tupou zone is significant due to its large-scale ecological restoration goals. The restoration of over 400 hectares of native forest, the creation of vital habitats, and its alignment with the district's vision through making use of strategic advantage of the environment, climate, soils, culture, and people of the far north, I feel qualifies for consideration of appropriate impacts. In terms of it being managed through another zone, as I've just highlighted, the rural production zone is unsuited to this land holding. Its focus is on primary production. It's fundamentally different from the ecological restoration focus. The rural production zone does not provide a clear pathway for ecotourism and education activities. In terms of being managed through a combination of spatial layers, attempting to achieve this through a combination of overlays and precincts would likely lead to regulatory complexity and a lack of holistic management of land holdings. Overlays by their very nature are restrictive, and the Tupou zone requires an enabling framework to balance restoration with the economic activities that fund it. Having a specific zone tailored to the outcome sought by the zone seems a clearer methodology. While I appreciate that the outcomes sought by the zone are capable of being addressed through other mechanisms, I feel the nature of the zone, in terms of what has been trying to achieve, is unique and it's much tidier being addressed as a special zone. While the Section 42A report has expressed the opinion that a special purpose zone is not necessary, I contend the national planning standards provide for it, and I ask, what is the risk of providing for the outcome sought on the land holdings for a special purpose zone? So I'll also mention that I have read the legal opinion provided by council last week, and thought about options to amend the provisions to align with that advice. And I'm happy to work through alternative provisions to support the intent of the proposed special zone if it's considered appropriate by the panel. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Well, obviously, the idea of a precinct leaps out as the obvious question, which we've looked at covering off in your evidence, and I think you've used the term tidier. What you're looking at doing is tidier than other alternatives.
Yeah, I think you lose the impetus of what the zone is trying to achieve through a precinct or an overlay. It's still relying on the underlying zone, so it just seems you capture the intent of what's been, sought and achieved on those land holdings through its own zone. And it's kind of cart before the horse. Normally, you can put dwellings down, or buildings down, tracks, roads, whatever it is, and then plant afterwards. But this is when the planting first, and as we see, it takes 20 odd years before you actually see where those benefits lie, and where it may be appropriate to have those education, eco-educational, eco-tourism facilities.
I think there's a lot of people in the far north that are going through that sort of proposal of trying to make their holdings ecologically significant or the like, or trying to protect them in various ways. And obviously you've done a lot of work and there is an element of uniqueness, but is it truly unique?
That's a good question, but I have not seen, I'm not aware of any of this scale or nature.
And you don't think it could be accommodated through precinct provisions?
It possibly can, but I think a zone is tidier. You've got the context of what the zone is about. It's got its own tailored objectives and policies in terms of what it's trying to achieve, and explains that sort of trade-off between the restoration and being able to facilitate ecotourism and eco-education facility.
Yeah, I'll carry on from that. I take it from the ecology from you, Dr. Craig, is that you don't intend to do any productive farming on the property at all?
No, not very soon. You're going to do productive
Oh, you are going to
get rid of the better soils
on the better state.
some of it
Well, on that basis, would a precinct be appropriate, because you could then rely on all of those provisions that apply on the underlying zone, rural production zone, and then have bespoke spatial provisions in the precinct to specifically enable your conservation activities. Rather than having to, you'd have to write your own bespoke rural production provisions, and I think you had a go at that. Whereas I think we're a precinct that sort of has some value. It says, yes, the underlying zoning has some value, but we need this additional space, site-specific spatial layers to provide for this activity in that underlying zone. That's probably the argument for precinct.
There is some value in what you're saying, like there are some crossovers between the rural production zone and the proposed provisions for the two-bird special zone. I guess it depends how that precinct looks and how it works with the underlying zone. Yeah, I just feel it's a lot tighter having everything in the one-stop shop, and I struggle to see what the risk is in terms of having a special zone as opposed to a precinct.
When we went through this in hearing nine, when it came to horticulture, the criticism that was applied to that zone was you're duplicating all the rural objectives and policies and provisions in another zone when you just have an element. So is that valid in this case? I mean, you would be replicating a lot of rural production provisions?
I don't agree the objectives and policies are the same as a rural production zone. I think they're intended to
Okay, yes, they are.
what outcomes are quite different to that of the rural production.
Just
So-
playing, okay, thanks. Just playing devil's advocate a little bit. The rural production zone does enable visitor accommodation. I mean, I'm looking at the version that's in the council's right. It's the notified one. It does enable visitor accommodation and an education facility. Can you just explain why they aren't enough? I assume an education facility would be eco-tourism application, and visitor facility would be eco-tourism accommodation.
This isn't part of the difficulty that we don't know where they're going, but we're planting. Maybe we get up there and come up with the environment, which then will make it incredibly difficult for us.
Yeah, so in the rural production zone, visitor accommodation allows for permitted activity up to 10 people. And then discretionary activity, anything more than that. That's correct, Mr. Correct. And then when it comes to education facility, it has a permitted threshold. The control hours of operation. And it's within a residential unit, so that's possibly, but again, with a restricted discretionary pathway, it would go beyond that permitted standard. So can you just give us a reason why that's not enough?
Well, the exemptions sort of for the vegetation removal, essentially for these activities, I mean, they probably freely be done now prior to planting, but the whole premise of this special purpose zone is the planting happens prior, and once the ecology is established over the land holdings, there'll be a better understanding of where those high quality areas will be, and that's where the clearance will be required. And the exemptions are for those specifically eco-education tourism facilities, not for visitor, just for visitor accommodation or for the other activity.
So wider nature. So wider nature of facilities that you're aiming for basically in this.
It's very specific.
Enough covered by education facilities and the like.
Yeah, it's being very specific about what it's providing for. It's not just any visitor accommodation. It's not just any education facility. It's to do with the eco value of this land holding. So I think it's quite unique in that respect.
Well, thank you. And
I just said, was involved in a walkway of power eclipse. And I just remember the difficulties of trying to work with council rules and on a track which would be give the best opportunity to educate people who use the waterway. So it ended up going through places that might be completely the wrong place on it. And it was fantastic things purely because of what was allowed to be clear and not clear. See how difficult it can be to marry these things together under this.
Yeah, okay, thank you. You watched our presentation yesterday, Mr. McPhee.
I do.
And so you heard we put a few questions to Mr. Wyatt. And I think, so if you mentioned something about control layer.
Potentially,
Yeah.
potentially, as a more targeted sort of solution.
As an alternative, do you want to explain to us again what that means? Because I'm not sure that's anything that's been adopted in the plan today, so that would be a mechanism.
Yeah, I guess my rationale there is what it sort of boils down to from my understanding, regulatory perspective, is a potential restrictions on future ecotourism and not having a pathway for that and associated clearance. So if we wanted to provide a clearer pathway for that in the Tupou zone, I think we could do that through a more targeted set of provisions. There's a couple of points I want to make actually. The site, a lot of it's in the coastal environment overlay. There's quite stringent policy framework and NZTPS and RPS around protecting biodiversity essentially in that areas. We need to be mindful of that and provide a permitted activity pathway for vegetation clearance. We definitely need to make sure those are satisfied. And with that, I think there's a bit of uncertainty around this concept around the BVI, biodiversity value index, and how that could be practically applied as a permitted activity condition. Council staff and just thinking, how could they apply that? So I guess, as I said, absolutely support what the outcomes you're seeking to achieve here. I think we all kind of acknowledge that there's no barriers to restoration, more around the potential future restrictions on areas that have been restored and become an SNA. I also sort of made the point that, you know, we took out the SNA provisions from the PDP approved and recommended taking out through hearing 4. And so the risk of some of this vegetation to be identified as SNA in the short term are probably quite low. So I guess I'm just thinking that I'm not convinced the special purpose zone is required. I'm not convinced it meets the criteria of national planning standards. But I would certainly work towards finding a more targeted solution that would kind of achieve the outcomes they're seeking. And so if it was a specific control layer or precinct, it would sit under the rural production zone or within it, and it'll be a bespoke set of policies, 1 or 2 policies potentially, and a rule that was quite specific on the pathway to go towards. As an option, I'm putting on the table as an alternative.
Yeah, no, so we're sort of happy to explore that here.
So do you see a precinct as an option?
Potentially, I probably see there's more of a workable option than a special purpose zone.
In terms of the outcomes, I mean, you're looking for a pathway for ecotourism related education, right? And clearance associated with that as your primary income. Is that the summary?
That's something we see at the moment, yes. I have no idea where we're going to be into this.
Oh, there might be another district plan at that point.
There might be if you add.
And I can guarantee neither of us.
Not at the hearing. Anyway.
Can I just make a quick point? In terms of the short-term SNA issue, like the SNAs probably won't be SNAs in the short term anyway, the planting. So that's more an issue down the track in 20, 30 years time. You know, you want to put an eco-tourism or eco-education facility. You're dealing with quite a different situation in say 5 years time.
And please remind me, how come you didn't opt in?
We didn't write the submission. Dr. Craig approached us to assist with this hearing.
I'm unaware of the opt-in process that came out in minute 23.
I have some vague recollection. I'm sorry, I didn't have the ability to do it. So.
I just have a question about the map in your presentation. Yes, it was really helpful with the spatial extent of the site, and then it shows the percentage of the site that was. It was at the start of your presentation, the percentage of the site that will remain in farming, did you say? That's your intent?
It's currently remaining in farmlands, but our intention is we will remove a lot more of the.
Oh, there we are.
The roadway soils.
Blue. So. So the bottom portion there, when you say your intent is not currently, so horizons, you're thinking in terms of next 10 years, 20 years. So immediately those other two portions there are being planted, as you said, 100,000 a year. The land class 3 and 4 fund currently, and you intend to carry on farming that for the next 10 years, 20 years.
Probably something like that, yes.
Yes.
So the reason that we've only taken out the area which is on the right of that yellow line
Yes.
is because we wanted a clear pest control line that we could put in place, because you can't put most of these pest control things in a paddock of sheep or cattle.
Mm-hmm.
So we needed a line that we filled with like a wall that we could stop pests from moving into the area that we're planting. So that's the logistics of why we come back that first. But we won't stop them.
Probably something that we can't control, but the ETS as well, your type of proposal. It's the measuring that you do to show carbon sequestration, all the different types of trees. It's very interesting and really explored a different approach. So I don't know, maybe you might be a game changer for showing how it can work in Northern.
Yeah, we're trying to create tools that other people can use, and the councils and government can also see and see if some of our current regulations.
And as you say, providing incentives and enabling that work instead of regulation and the stick of thou shalt not.
Well, hopefully this sort of thing will pay for itself in the future. Certainly doesn't now.
I'm just wondering, what's currently reading from here. I'm just wondering whether we might bring in Mr. Whittle, who's still to help us discuss the way forward. It seems to me that I think what we would probably like to see happen is both parties continue talking and see if we can agree. We're sort of, the nation is that we sort of feel increasingly like an area where both parties could agree, but not necessarily. Anyway, Mr. Whittle, you've got any, sort of looking, we're asking ourselves the question, where to from here?
Yeah, look, Mr. Wyeth and myself have actually discussed this at length since probably hearing 4. So it's something that we've been turning our mind to for a long time, but acknowledge there's possibly some unclear pathways for some activities that are probably should or could be enabled in certain circumstances. I think Mr. Wyeth, I support his preliminary idea that maybe a precinct could be quite targeted as well, and I guess also reduce risk of more broad unintended consequences. So we can continue having that discussion if the submitter is supportive of that.
Okay, no, thank you. That's a nice clear direction. You want to add anything, Mr.
I was just going to know, like leaving aside the precinct approach, sort of pathway for ecotourism, indigenous vegetation clearance is a key consideration that needs to be brought into the equation. And like, well, I've had some initial discussion about ecology experts, and I've got some reservation around that, but BBI as a concept. So we'd probably a bit of work to do there in terms of finding out how that would work in practice as as a potentially permitted pathway for clearance. So just flagging that, I guess.
So it's an approach, it's not stepping too far out of line with what the way the direction which the plan's being taken as well. And an overview that, you know, the precinct investigating further the idea of precinct.
I'm happy to look at it and work with council in that regard. I just have to reiterate, like it depends what the precinct does. I mean, a lot of these activities can happen prior to planting the extensive, you know, areas that are supposed to be planting. So the net benefit of what's happening here is significant, and hence.
So is the issue that you want to establish the activities after the planting within the planted areas? And therefore clear what you planted to make way for these activities, as opposed to putting them there and plant around them. And I think that's possibly where the tension is, isn't it? Because the presumption is that you would need to clear indigenous vegetation in order to put the activity in, whereas the plan is sort of structured is to assume that it happens in an opposite way.
You're exactly right. So it's one of this cart before the horse in this instance. So it's looking at the big picture. The big picture is significant ecological restoration for this landholding, and you know that isn't cheap. And the whole funding model relies on ecotourism, eco-education, and potentially later on the sequestration.
Is the presumption that any structures would be put in areas that are not planted yet? In other words, you're not relying on centuries old indigenous vegetation to be cleared by areas that
We don't actually know where we're going to put them, but the key thing is it's got to be a place that delivers messages, and so only time is going to give us the answer to where is the best place, rather than just saying, well, otherwise we could just leave lots of areas bare in the hope.
there is some clear national direction about, you know, the clearance of it. It's not just what the plan says, it's what the regional policy statement says, and it's also about the NPS for biodiversity. So it's biodiversity. So I think that's really where your concern seems to be coming with this. That it's not just a district plan matter; it's instruments above that we have to give effect to, and how that can.
Sort of, you know, potentially providing a permitted pathway for future activities, which is so unknown, and the extent of them is so unknown. How do we know that it's going to meet those higher order directions?
Well, the extent is controlled by the quantum of the rules. How many size?
Clearance doesn't have a associated threshold of it. So that's what I'm saying. We probably need to work through the clearance rules, and potentially that's not just a tack on permitted activity conditions, specific rule associated with this activity.
It seems to me that there is a pathway through this. I think it probably needs some nuance. Well, they're all very experienced practitioners and know the district really well. So you're happy, obviously you're happy to keep talking, and we're sort of quite happy to leave this item open, I think, to see where we get to. Consider obviously you're late to the, a little bit late to the table.
I guess I had a question as well, about this zone in particular of naturally occurring indigenous biodiversity, which I think, well, we have a lot of mechanisms and I guess a presumption to regulate in that way, compared to intended planting and restoration and enhancement, which the zone is grounded on, this request for the zone. So I'm not sure if that's
kind of what I was thinking. You could have a pathway for clearance that relates to areas that have been planted within this precinct.
compared to.
That's what I was thinking.
Rather than a wider rule that could apply more broadly. Possibly. I mean, we need to work out how that would actually have that clear record of what you planted, when to then allow it to be cleared in 10 years' time. But we definitely need a bit more certainty around that, in my view, than reading private documents.
It's a reasonably positive outcome from the hearing. It's not a no.
Yeah, I understand.
And
I think we would struggle to probably meet the higher order documents if you were going to go into areas that haven't been planted, I think I could create potentially some difficult hurdles in those higher order documents. But if it's planted and you're looking to put something in there and people know, and you know that it's going to occur in a limited way, that feels a little bit more.
Yeah, providing the overall biodiversity benefit is.
Yes, that's right. And you can have some measurements like that.
I think as well, when considering this item, the fact that you're measuring it, you'll have a lot of evidence to show, and I think now that we have a lot of GIS and aerial mapping available to us as a council, can show that movement over time of things that were intentionally planted compared to things that were. Was one of the considerations Michael added as well.
You could get the council drone out and fly over as well.
The council, what, sorry?
The drone,
All right.
check out what's going on.
Well, I think given the amount of measurement that you're saying that you're doing, you'll have much more evidence in council. And yeah.
Okay, well, I think, I think we all reasonably agreed that we should continue discussing if we appropriate pathway. As I've said before, the right of reply for this hearing is going to be delayed for a number of reasons. We've got other submitters coming back with some further clarification and detail. So we're certainly happy to allow you to.
Anticipate this one might take a bit
And it might take a little bit longer, that's right. But what I'm saying is that we'll check in at that point, and see where you're going. And then it might be that we grant a specific.
We're agreed on the option and we just work through the detail.
Yeah. But we encourage you to converse with the council officers as soon as possible.
Yep, well, you do take that opportunity to work further on this. Thank you.
Is there anything else? Any other comments
On the table.
That's absolutely brilliant.
I have.
There any landscapers yet?
I've got lots of comments, but I'm not involved.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation and the evidence. And we look forward to hearing some further progress from you.
So just to clarify, I just contact Mr.
Well, that's literally was what the opt-in process really encouraged, was that there'd be a number of engagements at council officer level where you would discuss and agree, hope mostly of a way forward, and then the provisions come out of that. And then that gets presented to us in council replies. So I suppose you're playing catch up a little bit. But one would think what we want is to see an agreed pathway. That seems to be the most important thing we achieve. Is how you're going to get there, and then the provisions will work in that whole thing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
No, I understand our next submission, Maria Bright, is outside. Shall we go?
Yep. That's okay.
I'll just mute the room while I am doing that. Yeah.
And we're here to hear evidence on your submission of 116. And you have someone with you as well?
Oh, just a support person.
A support listing.
Wonderful.
You're not presenting any evidence, it's just yourself.
Just myself.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, so this is in relation to the Opua Business Park. One of the three areas, I think you're actually concerned with the undeveloped section.
It's currently wetlands, yes.
Is Mr. Benson still wandering around outside at all?
I was just gonna go and check.
He's got an interest in this matter.
I understand that there are three areas, one's the marina, one's sort of the triangle area, and then there's an area of undeveloped wetland.
There's what, I thought it was 4 areas that the farmers holdings are proposing to resolve. And they want them all to be mixed use, so there's a couple of areas down on the waterfront. There's what they call the Palenzo Triangle, and then this is what they're calling the Marine Business Park. So the Marine Business Park is wetlands opposite the Palenzo Triangle. Is the area, it's about 4 hectares, I think, that I'm considering.
Okay, right, well, we'll hand it over to you.
Okay,
And we're all listening and paying attention.
kia
Oh, feel free to sit and deliver.
all right.
Stand.
I don't know whether I'll be wanting to face
No,
it.
if you feel more comfortable standing, by all means do so, but we're trying to put this
Sure.
forward and relax this.
Thank you very much. So, tēnā koutou katoa, everyone, thank you for hearing this. My name is Maria Bright, and I have a doctorate in education, climate change education, environmental education. And I oppose Farnell's Holdings application to rezone what Farnell's Holdings are calling the Opua Marine Business Park, but what I think is probably better named as the Opua wetland. So I'm sure you're all aware of the importance of wetlands, but they continue to be the most underrated and abused environments globally. They sequester carbon at up to 4 times the rate of mature forests. They filter water from farms and urban areas that is going into our Moana and our sea. They act as sponges and critical buffers for extreme weather conditions, and they can provide moisture in much needed times of drought. As well as that, wetlands provide a vital transition zone from land to sea to a diverse range of species, and they are a biodiversity hotspot. So the wetlands are the kidneys of our earth. They cleanse. And you'd think that for such a vital organ, that they would be protected and cared for, but no, not us humans. Us humans here in New Zealand, we've managed to destroy 90% of our wetlands. Globally, it's 95%. Just imagine how your body would function on 10% kidney capacity. No wonder our oceans are in peril. So Farnell's Holdings' vision for Opua is based on an economic model. They have identified the Opua Marina as one that can be exploited, and yes, much of our local economy is based around Moana. But what is the future economy really like if the area, if we do not have a healthy Bay of Islands, a healthy Moana? What is Farnell's Holdings' vision for protecting the health of this vital economic resource? So here in the Bay of Islands, our marine is able to cope with increased sedimentation. Currently, 40% of fresh water coming into the bay comes from the Kaikohe River, but 80% of the sedimentation comes from the Kaikohe River. Our oceans are warming at a horrific rate, and it is increasing salination. We have increased pollution, we have invasive species, and we have overfishing. How economically will this area be, and what will our lifestyles be like? The Bay of Islands area, our marine environment continues to be severely degraded. So in regards to our changing climate, we will experience more extreme weather events. We will. What we're seeing in Europe is what we'll be seeing here. More droughts, more fires, more floods. The proposed district plan promises to build climate resilience by restoring ecosystems, particularly wetlands and coastal margins. So why would we want to rezone this area? Furthermore, legally rezoning wetlands is non-compliant with higher order direction. Rezoning risks being ultra-vires under the RMA Act, the National Policy Statement from Freshwater Management, and the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and the NRC policy all state that there is a need to protect wetlands. The importance of wetlands is acknowledged far and wide, but it is not often acted on. And here is a point in case. And under Farmers Holdings Watch, this tiny patch of wetland has been integrated. I understand Farmers Holdings already do have a resource consent to dump up to 10 metres high of fill and waste in this area. They've already put in significant drainage and they've installed a heavy gauge floodgate in an attempt to stop tidal flow coming in and out. But even so, this wetland is still waterlogged for a significant part of the year. And when I look at it, I wonder how economically viable is this area for the infrastructure that is needed for an industrial park? What else are they going to have to do? And what is it going to take for them to have an area that's not constantly flooded or impacting on the neighbours? Furthermore, the Far North District Council memo questioned the efficacy of an off-grid wastewater and stormwater management that was proposed for this site. So, but an important question is, does Far North Holding actually need this land for their master plan? Just a few hundred metres away in a larger and much more suitable piece of land that is already owned by Far North Holdings, there is already a light industrial area operating. And this would be far more appropriate for a business park than taking away wetlands. So these precious wetlands that I'm talking about, despite the efforts to degrade it, this once vibrant biodiversity hotspot still manages to provide habitat for bittern, which are nationally and critically endangered species, for spoonbills, for wicket, for kiwi, for cocklepuff, baby mullet shrub, for mullet, for eels. And we know this because oilers have seen them. Thanks to the work of Baybush Action and Project Island Song, the Opua Forest and the Pipili Islands are now starting to thrive again. Kakariki, initially located to the islands, have made their way to Opua, and these wetlands are part of what form a vital link between land and sea. So, I oppose this area being rezoned, and I propose a different story, a positive story. One for Far North Holdings and for Far North District Council, don't rezone these wetlands. Instead, Council could support a community in restoring these vital wetlands, which are situated along the popular cycle trail, the heritage train and state highway. Restore them back to a vibrant and healthy ecosystem. By protecting and enhancing the natural asset, the Council will be supporting an ecosystem that helps to cleanse the bay, offset some negative impacts of the marina and the surrounding urbanisation, and at the same time, these wetlands will provide an authentic and educational experience for both locals and visitors alike. And it could showcase how councils can work proactively with local communities. I'm sure you're aware that the wetland rezoning application is one of the 4 areas, as you mentioned, and it's part of the master plan. I feel that it's a really blunt tool to just try and apply mixed use zoning to all areas without considering or recognising the special character of each site or the community concerns. I understand the original plan was done on a desktop in Christchurch, and there was very little, if any, community consultation. So if this land becomes mixed use, our 10% of our kidney function for this country is lessened more. You want to be responsible for that? And even though these wetlands are very small, they are significant and deserve our protection, as if our life depends on it, because actually, ultimately, it does. Here, none here.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Now, you've got a couple of witness statements here.
I do. I agree with the witnesses, yes.
We've got other witnesses here.
No.
Rita.
Oh, kia ora.
You can you can bring your witness forward and they can present their submission or their evidence on your behalf. So you are Trudy or Cynthia? Trudy. Trudy.
No, I want to.
You have your statement here, and you're more than welcome to read it to us. We've only just received it, so.
Okay, so I'm Trudy Kingham, neighbour to the property. I make this statement in opposition to the proposal by Farmers Holdings. My family have lived as direct neighbours to these wetlands for over 30 years. During this time, I've witnessed the first-hand the incredible abundance of life that these wetlands support. We regularly see and hear native and threatened species in and around the wetlands. Bittern, spoonbills, weka, kiwi, popopo, the baby Murray trout, mullet and eels. These species rely on the tidal flows and natural wetland cycles for breeding, feeding and safe habitat. The wetlands are alive with bird song and fish movement when the ecosystem is left undisturbed. The area is not just a piece of land, it's a thriving ecological community, deeply connected to the surrounding environment and valued by those who live there. Over recent years, however, I have also witnessed the devastation caused by Far North Holdings Limited's actions. In particular, the installation of a heavy gauge floodgate across the road has had a profound and damaging impact. The floodgate deliberately alters tidal flow, slowing and drying out parts of the wetland. Since its installation, I have seen a decline in the abundance of bird life and fish activity. Areas that once were alive with movement and sound are now diminished. What was once a natural functioning wetland ecosystem is being gradually degraded in front of my eyes. Just to add to that, Far North Holdings Limited also did drain development over the last 3 years to further drain those wetlands and the shaping of the drains to dry out those wetlands. So what was there 2 to 3 years ago is now less, but it can be restored. It is heartbreaking to stand as a neighbour who has cared for and valued this wetland for 3 decades and see its destruction being engineered in the name of development. Far North Holdings Limited's proposal to rezone the land to mixed use, which could allow almost anything to be built here, would only accelerate this loss and permanently destroy the values that my family and the wider community hold dear. This wetland is not a vacant site waiting to be activated or redeveloped. It's already active, alive with native species, natural flood protection functions and cultural value. To lose it would not only be an environmental tragedy, but a personal one for those of us who have lived alongside it and know its worth. For these reasons, I strongly oppose the rezoning and urge the council to protect this wetland and reject Far North Holdings Limited's request. I attach my notes. Got me to run through them? I'd like to.
It's fine.
Strategic. The proposed rezoning is inconsistent with the PDP's strategic direction, which emphasises protecting significant natural resources, biodiversity and climate resilience. The Okura Marina Park, as named, contains functioning marine wetlands that play a critical role in flood migration, water quality improvement and biodiversity protection. Rezoning to mixed use introduces uncertainty and risk, allowing activities that may irreversibly destroy these wetlands, undermining both PDP and national level strategies, national level. The current zoning protects current margins, coastal margins and wetlands. The rezoning request does not align with the objectives, policies and outcomes for these sensitive areas. Mixed-use zoning is incompatible with the ecological function of wetlands and residential neighbours. Existing zoning recognises the natural hazard, risks of flooding, erosion and sea level rise. As shown on the council's own flood maps, this is a high flood area. Under the section 75, subsection 3 of the Reserve Management Act, plans must give effect to higher order instruments. The National Policy Statement of Freshwater Management requires maintaining or improving freshwater quality. Wetlands are specifically listed as critical for achieving this. New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement directs councils to protect and Indigenous biodiversity, preserve the natural character of coastal environments, and avoid inappropriate subdivision and use. The Regional Policy Statement of Northland emphasises protection of wetlands, floodplains and Indigenous ecosystems. Rezoning to mixed use directly contradicts this. The applicant has not demonstrated why the current zoning is inappropriate. Instead, the reasons appear to be economic rather than environmentally or planning based. No evidence has been provided that the current zoning prevents appropriate use of the land consistent with the ecological values. Importantly, Far North Holdings Limited already owns a large site, just a few hundred metres away, that could be redeveloped and intensified, being the commercial estate, without threatening wetlands or floodplains. The existence of this alternative makes rezoning of the area marked Opera Marina Park entirely unnecessary and undermines any justification based on business needs. Economic benefits Far North Holdings does not outweigh the environmental, cultural and social costs of wetland loss. The site is not suitable for rezoning due to the national hazard risk. The flood hazard map shows that the site sits within zones of 50-year and 100-year flood events and subject to coastal erosion. This makes intensive development highly inappropriate. Wetlands act as kidneys, as raised by RIA, of the environment, filtering pollutants, trapping settlements, absorbing floodwaters, storing carbon and providing breeding grounds for fish and birds. The wetlands are home to life. Bittern, nationally threatened, spoonbills, weka, kiwi, kokopo, mullet and eels, all of which rely on these tidal flows and wetland function. The deliberate installation of the floodgate and the drainage to alter water flows has already negatively impacted habitat health. Further rezoning would just accelerate this degradation. Wetlands are taonga to Maori. They're valued for the kai gathering, biodiversity and waihu. Destruction of these wetlands undermines treaty principles of partnership and kai. The proposal would impose substantial and costly infrastructure demands. Keeping flood-prone land dry would require significant engineered drainage, pumping and stormwater works, which is contrary to the PDP objective of avoiding costly infrastructure or hazard-prone areas. Such works would shift flooding risk to surrounding residential properties, creating a long-term liability for the Far North District Council. There is no meaningful consultation with tangata whenua. Local consultation appears minimal. I myself found out about this by chance, and I am the neighbour. The proposal has not adequately considered community concerns regarding flooding, biodiversity loss and amenity effects. The rezoning is not the most appropriate, effective or efficient use to achieve PDP objectives. Maintaining wetlands provides multiple ecosystems, water purification, carbon sequestration, climate resilience and biodiversity at no cost at all to the council. Rezoning to mixed use would destroy these services, create ongoing infrastructure liabilities and degrade freshwater quality, contrary to all objectives to maintain or improve the overall quality of freshwater within the region. Allowing development would likely result in further wetland drainage, which is one of the leading causes of wetland loss in New Zealand. Given that Far North Holdings already has a viable site nearby for redevelopment, there is no efficiency or necessity in sacrificing an ecologically valuable wetland for development. For all these reasons, the rezoning request should be declined. Wetlands are a naturally significant ecosystem, already reduced in less than 10%. The site is demonstrably unsuitable for mixed-use development given its flood hazard, ecological values and cultural significance. It is contrary to all RMA Council Objectives regional policy statements. Far North Holdings' business case does not depend on destroying this wetland, as it has other land holdings in close proximity. I respectfully request the rezoning of the area identified as the Oakwood Marina Park be declined. And that council instead explore opportunities for the restoration of this wetland enhancement and recognition. We cannot give back the 90% of wetlands already lost to New Zealand. Farnham's Holdings has other areas to develop. This wetland has nowhere else to go. Please don't let it be destroyed.
Well, thank you for a very thorough detailed submission. You're not a planner?
Sorry,
Are you a planner?
I'm an accountant.
So, your evidence is really well prepared. You've identified all the higher order documents that we need to have regard to, and you've summarised them quite accurately. So, well done. You often have planners that can't write this articulate. Thank you.
It is something we feel quite passionate about, the wetland, and would be so sad to see it go as a wetland, and the fact that they have other choices, and the fact that it is a floodplain. It's contrary to any common sense, logical, rational thought.
The cost would be, I can't imagine how you really start.
I've got a couple of questions that might apply to both of you. And we are going to go, if we have time today, we're going to be going to see it today, if not tomorrow.
It has drastically changed due to the Holdings actions of that extra gauge and the drains.
You know whether, is this wetland, and I know you're not ecologists, but do you know if it's a freshwater wetland or is it a coastal?
Both.
So it's
So
affected by.
it's in a basin, and it takes a while from the hill behind it, on home road, coastal forest, all comes down to that. Plus it has tidal inland, which the floodgates are trying to stop. So there is a creek there that has, and it has brackish water that comes in and goes out. So it's a little bit tidal. It has been impacted by the causeway that's been put work, Cleanso's Triangle, which is also part of the bodies. You'll enjoy seeing that, so tidy and nice. And then, yeah, so you've got the runoff and you've got the brackish water coming in.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And whereabouts are the gates that you refer to? Is that on the causeway?
Up and down, front of the
They're opposite the road.
There's an aerial photograph on your evidence.
Yeah, so the floodgate is the other side of the road. It is really dried
So
out.
we'll be able to see that quite clearly.
yes.
Yeah,
Which is your property?
That was my question as well.
okay, so I own two properties there. One is at 1019 Kaikohe Road.
Doesn't help you very much.
Did you want to point it out on the?
Possibly, and I also,
1091.
no, 1019.
Thanks, yeah.
And also a property called 75 Kaikohe Road, which is directly opposite.
There's two properties just at the bottom of the photograph.
Okay, so our property runs from Bath at Beaufort Street.
Mm.
There's an access from Beaufort Street up to. Oh, here, this is my property here, this driveway here.
You can draw a circle.
Yeah, this area here to here. And also just around here.
Can you just pass it?
Yeah.
Just so it can be clear.
Thank you.
So pretty much on the northeastern corner.
Thanks.
Geography is not my,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so we're the neighbour of that wetland.
How long have you been with you?
I've lived there myself now for 8 years, but it's been in the family for 35 years, I think.
Yeah, that was my question, was around the resource consent. There's an existing resource consent from the NRC relation to that site. Are you aware of it at all?
Yes, I am, and there's a lot of, I didn't have time to review it in time to add it to my witness statement, because I only found out about it the day before. But that resource consent has a lot of misleading information in it, because the resource consent it said that the water only came down from the hill. It mentioned no tidal. At the time that resource consent went through, the council, all the farmers holdings were not even aware of that floodgate when they were planning to do the development. It's,
They would have perceived the floodgate was going to help it, presumably.
they weren't aware that it was tidal. They thought
The
all,
Northern Regional Council didn't.
well, there was no information that actually submitted that information that it was tidal. And the report the farmers holdings did at the time to get that resource consent through did not mention that it was tidal. They only implied through the report that the water came down through the hill, which is, as Ria says, it's both freshwater wetlands and tidal. And in that submission that Farnworth Holdings did, they proposed developing a smaller wetlands area. But they didn't even consider how that wetland or the drains behind it would be cleared. There wasn't, I feel it lacked a lot of supporting documents and also a lot of how they were going to handle the drains, the flood area.
So why do you think it's not been developed for a long time? I mean, it's been vacant for decades, that site.
I think the reason it's Finance Holdings Limited, they proposed to dump their dredgings there. And I think and possibly also Poketiti. And I think those dredgings have not occurred. They were planning to redevelop the coastal area of Midday.
That's right.
Right, and I felt that some of the dig out there was going to be put on that land. The front part of the land is very dry, between the road and the drains or streams. That's very dry and that's very solid.
Oh, because it's steep, is it?
It's flat, yeah, and it's solid. It's been used as a dumping ground for a long time. So that area itself is probably capable of being built on, but it's the area behind the drains or the streams. Possibly you could even call them rivers, because they're taking water in and out of a tidal area. I think that's the definition of a river. Back in my school science days. But yeah, it's a lot of that submission. I think if it had been adequately publicised at the time and people could have looked into it, there would have been challenges to it. And the Regional Council and the Far North Council would have been placed in a totally different position of authorising. There was one side presenting the information, and there wasn't any great challenges or scientific information to say it wasn't just coming from the hills. It was
But given all that you're saying, the other submitters, you know, you've never done anything about it in the past.
Well, when we took ownership, my brother did, Michael Owens, he submitted. But a lot of the submitters didn't have any educational background to argue the point. And the resource consent actually just got rolled over without us even knowing. You know, there's nothing that says in the news or on the notice board that says, you know, this resource consent. Also, the resource consent, they were planning to dump so many metres high. I don't know how much cubic metres, but it was a non-notifiable resource consent. I'm not sure how high, David, 5 metres? 45,000 cubic metres. And it was considered that was a non-notifiable resource consent. So how are you supposed to challenge something when you're not even notified as a neighbour?
Not only that, just in the process of going through this submission, even though I'm quite well educated, I really struggle with the process. It's very, very hard for me to negotiate what needs to be negotiated to put in a formal submission. So for a lot of people, it's really beyond their reach for the process.
And I only found about it, you know, coincidentally through Ria. You know, and I'm a neighbour. And that resource management consent, that Fund of Holdings, it was 45,000 cubic metres, non-notifiable. Really? I mean, you've got to picture that, you know, 5 metres high of dirt, over 10 acres, non-notified. So how are you supposed to challenge these things when something And that's a lot of dirt.
Hmm.
45,000 cubic meters. That's non-notifiable. So it's very difficult to challenge something that you're not aware of.
So what's the zoning on it now is rural lifestyle, isn't it?
Yes.
So what would you see being on the site consistent with that zoning?
Well, it's, I think it should be developed. Those wetlands should be developed. There's the train site above the road.
As wetlands, developed as wetlands.
It should be developed as wetlands.
Restore, because they are currently wetlands, even though there's been intensity. That was part of my point, there still is a lot of water there. So are you ever effectively going to get rid of the water when nature has enabled that area to have the specific purpose which we're trying to deny? And it's a really important service for the purpose, for the function of our whole bay. So so if you could restore it back to wetlands, it could have a greater economic benefit by being yet another tourist attraction for people coming to the bay. It could be educational, it could have multi-plus environmental, which would help also the Bay of Islands, which actually, to be frank, needs help. The marine environment needs help. And this is one small piece that you can do. Yes.
I feel given that the train station is going to be directly across the road, this is a great opportunity to have a beautiful entrance to the bay. You know, you could have the train site, Gabriel, the train coming in from Kaikohe. Across the road, you could develop, as I say, the front part of it is quite solid, the back part is wetlands, but you could develop further tourist areas without damaging. Obviously, you can't put great infrastructure there, but you could develop that area into something that would be, that maintained the wetlands, kept it. I mean, it could be amazing.
I'm sure local community would be very happy, and I'd be happy to spearhead something that a community development there that would restore those wetlands. If it was supported by farmers holdings and district council, we could turn it into something quite magnificent.
Yeah. Just in the olden days, before any of us were around, they used to bring the longboats up that area to get fresh water. Now, there's quite a history in the area, and as you'll be aware, the road used to go around the back. It has history. Why aren't we using it? Why aren't we using the treasures of Northland? Inviting people in. Why are we looking at damaging these areas? It could be a great treasure for Northland. Can you imagine it as you come around that corner? If you can picture it. And having, the train station on one side, having an ecological centre on the other side, and making that the entrance to the Bay of Islands, rather than some mixed-use industrial site that's going to kill that industrial area. Kill the wetlands by the industrial area.
I've brought up the resource consent that the Northern Region Council issued. It says that the consent expires in November 2028. So, they've had the consent for some time, and it says that they can do a number of activities. You've described some of them, the 45,000 cubic meters of fill, installing the floodgate, draining and placing fill within a reverted wetland, diverting existing drains and floodwater. And so the regional council issued this, which means they have a consent to do the things that
We
the
understand.
regional council has. We at the district council, you've talked about wetlands. What about built form? So you're saying you don't want to see any built form whatsoever on the site, or?
No, I think it could be done with respect to the land. They should be able to use that land for some economical use. And as I say, the front part of the land is quite hard. It's been filled. And I'm sure they could build that doesn't damage the floodplains, the hazard area. Sometimes it's very hard to build on a land though, which is already marked as floodland. You can't build on one part the way, hazard areas are designated. But yes, we're not looking at restricting the building activity, just not damaging the wetland and doing anything that would impact on it. Now, Felicity, just back on that resource consent, and it has false misleading information about where that water came from, saying that it only came from the hill. So I believe if there was some course in law, that could be challenged because the regional council was not given the full story. And again, it was possibly another desktop, created from Christchurch without viewing that land. So I don't know if there is a course in law that says yes, okay, so there
We
is.
don't make that decision.
Yeah.
We're not the.
Yeah, but there is bound to be, should be a course in law that actually says, go to the environment report and say, look, false information was deliberately provided in order to get the regional council, the Parliament District Council to support this submission. The fact that it does not mention its title is a huge failure.
But the issue here today is whether it's to be rezoned to mixed use.
Correct.
And that's, whatever has gone by the past has gone on. And if you do choose to rezone this to mixed use, then it's kind of open slather for that piece of land. Anything can happen. I'm guessing farmers holders could choose to not develop it, but they could. And given the amount of consultation we've had so far, it's unlikely the community would have much say in it. So that is our concern. My concern primarily is for the wetlands. And as you know, that is my number one hope. If it wasn't wetlands, I wouldn't be here today. Honestly, we need to preserve every single piece of wetland in the world that we can for the story. It's as simple as that. And this is for your grandchildren. This is something you long-term use. So it's as simple as that. If you resign it to mixed zone, will anything happen? But if you keep it as it is, then they're bound within the constraints of what we currently have. Come 2028, presumably they have to reapply or whatever. I don't know what happens then. But presumably it can't be changed from what it is now. So there's still some environmental benefits coming off it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Quite a passionate presentation. We certainly got the message.
I'm thrilled you're going to visit it. Thank you.
So, thank you very much.
And if you need to come to our place to see it, which I think you do,
Brilliant. We'll
be in touch.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks very much for your evidence and presentation. We have the other, just to clarify, we have the other statement by Cynthia Matthews, which we will read.
Thank you. Right.
Oh, do you want to read this statement to us, or are you happy for us to take that as read?
the only thing. Come on. Thank you so much for letting me talk.
Are you Miss Matthews? Are you
So
Miss
this is something, yes.
Are you Miss
Oh,
Matthews?
Peggy.
No, I'm just building.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
There's another two.
I'm Miss Messi.
You need my phone? Yeah.
I don't wish to read my statement, but I do want to offer a question. And I apologize. That is, in this second paragraph on the first page. Where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7th line down, where I say that, regarding the Palenza Triangle, the triangle without notification of local view consultation, and I say, and erroneously stating the consent also includes farm, which was rejected by the environment court. Only that latter part, only the oyster farm landing was rejected by the environment court, not the railroad company. So if you wanted to cross out without notification or local input. And then just make the sentence that started before that say, historic railroad terminal was a triangle. But it erroneously also stated that Gibson also included the oyster farm. The oyster farm was not included in the environment for. I believe those people who. No. I don't know, did that make any sense? Then I'll leave my corrected copies.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so we have one more person wishing to speak. You are, oh, you are something. We've got your statement here, so you have the right to read it to us, so. You can take it as read, you can summarize it, or you can read it. It's your right to do so.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess my main point is that the official characteristic of the area is going to be basically taken away with what's been proposed here. That's my main point. And my second main point is that we got to the stage where a vision has been presented that there's no input whatsoever from the local community. So, and as it turned out, what has been proposed here, a near neighbour like myself and other people in the community are not in agreement with.
Well, thank you very much. As I say, we'll give this written statement some serious consideration along with the other materials. And is that what you wanted to present to us?
I think it's just really emphasising what the characteristics of this place are. Because on the weekend, I had a neighbour contacting me that they had just seen a vision in this very area that we're talking about. And this is one of our rarest birds declining. It's a very special place. It goes out onto the Kaikohe River, and it's got kiwi there, it's got pukapu in the creeks, it's of very high ecological value. And when we had these FNA, that area was going to be earmarked for that. It's going to go onto that listing. And so I don't think we can overlook its natural values to the local people and everybody else for that matter. It's one of the last areas that go onto the river like that, the Estuarine area. And it also is, has all these food species and everything that are very special to us.
Are you neighbour of the site and
Yeah.
similar to some of the other submitters?
What's that?
Are you a neighbour, an immediate neighbour or close by the site?
Well, I am, you could say that, yes, because I live very close to Colenso Triangle,
Yes.
Rota Peru, that area.
You're not adjacent to the site.
I am not adjacent, but I am very close.
I have a question about your submissions. You talk about building heights.
Yes.
So you talk about the maximum building height of 12 metres. And then you say that scale is too intrusive. What to you is suitable?
Well, perhaps one level, not 3 levels of food in that environment, if you were going to build in there.
There's most of the development, I mean, we'll soon see that, but in terms of the existing built environment, there are a lot of houses around there that are only single level. I guess what's the rationale for a single level compared to 12 houses?
I'm just thinking that if it went to mixed use zone, there would be very little opportunity for control for any sort of input over what actually might be built there in the final. And it actually, if it was actually built there, that's what I'm saying. I think mixed use zone is a kind of a bit of a broad brush. Yeah, I mean, up to this time, we hadn't had much community input. Well, if it went to mixed use zone, we'd have even less input in there in terms of building heights and that kind of thing.
I think the current zone allows for 8 meters. My head, overall of the zone. So just note you're opposed to 12, but didn't have a proposed other height. That was all. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You know, we know you give up your own personal time to come and be able to present and prepare your submissions, so we appreciate the effort. And we visit on the site either today or tomorrow. Taking your submission into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're gonna have a lunch break now.
Sure.
And I think, we might make 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Half an hour, so maybe like half an hour. We have a half hour lunch break at just after 2 o'clock.
Okay, stopping the recording.